everyone. Welcome to another episode of Soul Vibes. And I would like to greet each and every one of you, whether you're watching this now live or later. My name is Alexis Sersha, and we're broadcasting live in what is today, 3rd of February 2024, for those watching much later. And so here we are in the midst of huge changes again, and we keep talking and discussing about this, but it just keeps getting bigger and bigger, whether that's in a bigger world or in a larger space of this world, or whether in our own personal life, personal experience. And so, normally when I sort of think about all the different programs that I do as the month is going, as I'm having my own experiences, I do write down just some points, like I jot down little points for this episode or that episode, depending on, what my intuition and the feelings, sort of how they guide me. And because there are so many things that happen, especially on the inner world, that I find that unless I kind of write them down or, record them, it's easy to forget because, sometimes last week, for example, could feel like centuries away and, these huge insights and huge things happen, but we do forget because then we go right into the next experience. And so for everyone, if you're not already doing that, like you do utilize like either a recorder or write a diary, maybe just point by point, because as you refer back, you can then gauge yourself and you can appreciate who you are and the things that you've experienced and how far you've come in these transformations, in the changes, or just in well-being. Lately I've really been thinking about this English saying, the proof is in the pudding. And it's because, for those that are not English speaking, what this is saying, that the proof, whether someone knows what they're talking about something, is in the pudding, is their own pudding, is in the results that they're making, or that they're creating within their life. And so the proof of my pudding for myself, and it's not really for anyone else, it is really for myself, because it's not like I have to keep changing and keep going somewhere, because that too can be a trap. But it mainly has to do is, how much more well-being am I feeling? The joy? Am I feeling the love? Am I feeling the sensuality in the everyday life? Am I enjoying, not 100%, because life does include all sorts of different things, but how am I managing that? How am I handling the intense emotions, perhaps some emotions that are not so pleasant? How am I handling what's happening in the world? How am I handling interpersonal relationships? Are they more satisfying? These are this is the pudding that if judgment there be, is my judgment of, am I choosing, or am I choosing the things, that are creating a wonderful, tasty pudding, basically the daily life. And it also has become much more apparent to me in relation with how much value I give onto, for example, someone else's authority, because in the past, for example, we could give authority over, to the doctors, to scientists, to government, to all of these people and agencies and institutions. But as more and more is collapsing and more this darkness is revealed, of course, it's all coming back to self, but also then in a new way, also with others, because once I clear out all of the traumas and let them go back into wholeness, let them go back into a flow. I am not anymore. It's kind of like all these filters fall away from my eyes, from my ability to perceive deeply, deeper into myself, but also further out there, further deeper into others. And I can perceive others in a much more clearer way. And you know, like initially can be quite shocking because you can see how, you know, if people are not clear, if people are still in their, you know, trauma responses and all of these kind of games, when they're not self, when a person is not connected with self, with soul self, they have no choice but to play games and manipulate and try to coerce and control people. And this is what the 3D reality, the duality really is all about. And so when you can clear your sight and your in this vision or inside through your own games and outside, you know, then through into others with compassion, of course, but this incredible clarity, then it is much easier than to navigate the world, because you can actually then, you know, you can't be deceived, you can't be people can't be deceptive, and also I can then judge what others are doing, and also if their life pudding is good or not. And it doesn't mean that all of it has to be like a holistic, you know, like you can now I can actually trust other people much more, because I can see that people have all sorts of different puddings, so to speak, and they are quite expert in many ways, even though perhaps they have not gone through the spiritual cleansing and the spiritual transformations. And I can just then allow and receive assistance and joy and communication and help from others who don't have to be perfect, just like I am not perfect, you know. So there's much more like this relaxation and relaxing myself into my own life and into relationships with others, and therefore the community. And of course, that happens, you know, after when you go deep into your own transformations. It does require a certain time to be on your own. It does require that alone space, and it continues to do so even now. Like, for example, I do have a lot of my own space where I do, for example, like go into nature walks and whatever it is, play music, you know, la la la. But there also is now space and a renewed trust into community, into other people. And that a lot of this also has to do with this huge, you know, change, a huge change in how I view things, how I perceive myself. And that's why that self-love is always number one. It is because through my own self-love, I can recognize my needs, my human needs, my human preferences, and all of these things. And I myself can fulfill those needs from my own inner well, from my own soul self. This need and you know, and the desire and the joy to receive self-love, to bask in the self-love, to treat myself in this beautiful, compassionate, friendly way, so that it's not only that I can become, you know, a person that others want to be around, but it is that I am the best and biggest and wonderful companion of my own self. I've become through all of the work, this person that I actually like to be around, you know, and this person that respects me, and this person that loves me, that in all these new ways discovers me, and that I'm kind of like, you know, my own judge and in authority into what I deem that is accurate, what I deem that is truth, what I deem that is a preference and value, and all of these things. And this really becomes a reality once I've integrated all of those different parts, all of that intensity of emotions that used to, overwhelm, and that incredible intensity of the shadow work, and the parts that used to hijack my own inner parts, that used to hijack my world, my choices, and they unconsciously I would go through them to choose my friends, my partners, my job, or all of these things that perhaps were actually just a repeat of traumatized, let's say, things, or of things that it was just repeating certain patterns over and over. And even though in my mind, perhaps I had gathered enough information to think that I would know better, but these kind of patterns are so much more deeply embedded. And especially, if you are hijacked by a deeply embedded part that perhaps has been born in your childhood, especially perhaps before you even were able to think. And this, in a bigger picture, it's not like there is a blame of anyone. Of course, there is a responsibility that we put, let's say, in this clarifying one's boundaries, we put responsibility on where it lies. So you become really good at, okay, this belongs to you, this belongs to me, this belongs to my partner, this belongs to my parent, my brother, my sister, my friend, the society, but this also belongs to me. And in any interaction, of course, there is always that part of me that participated willingly, perhaps consciously, or I would be fighting against it and it would lead to suffering, but unconsciously from that, let's say, wounded or damaged parts, I would willingly be participating in with whatever perhaps wasn't healthy or good or whatever for me. And so, as we're clearing all these layers, and how, we keep clearing these layers and layers, and we keep sinking deeper and deeper into ourselves by just doing those practices, which is taking time for self, being, invoking the presence of soul by breathing, by listening to music, by going for a walk, by whatever means, and then expanding that to incorporate all daily life. And so, as initially, let's say for me, was that I could feel my soul presence, this presence in beautiful places, on the beach, on a beautiful walk, in a forest, in this peaceful. So those kind of conditions had to be met, or perhaps that's what was in my mind, that these are places, spaces that were worthy of my soul so pure and fine, that it felt like I would taint the presence of my soul if I took it into spaces that I didn't like so much. And yet those were the spaces exactly that needed the soul past presence the most. And so we keep allowing, and we keep bringing how, just this awareness, consciousness, because this presence, it's this awareness, it's consciousness. And so how do we bring or invite or invoke this presence consciously in those spaces that perhaps, we don't like as much? So, for example, in the past, I would used to find that I didn't like the, let's say, work and the job. It was stressful, and it was something that I felt I had to do. And so when I thought, wow, I have to bring this presence of my soul into that space, when I initially remembered and started breathing and just being aware of me in that space, it felt very unsafe. And then I kept on doing it because there was this separation between this part of my life and that part of my life. You know, the beautiful forest, peaceful, blah blah blah, that part of my life, and then those parts that I didn't enjoy as much. And of course, bringing that awareness, consciousness, light, enlightenment into those spaces, of course, it stirred them up incredibly. And this is what we see now in the larger space of the world, because the presence of consciousness, of awareness, is stirring up all of this stuff that was not pleasant before, that was there before, but it just wasn't seen. And so initially then, and not for short time, for quite, a couple of years, 2-3 years, I mean, that in particular spaces, that just this now I see with the hindsight how it all got stirred up, and it all got, like I was able to see how I was in those spaces, and how my own participation and behavior and not meeting my own needs was sucking me into not healthy spaces. And even perhaps for someone else that space would be healthy, perhaps, but for me it wasn't. And so when I, when I wasn't sort of meeting or being connected with my true self, with my soul self, I wasn't meeting, I wasn't even acknowledging or being able to see what I needed, who I was. And so I wasn't meeting those things, and yet I still, and then I connected with others in unhealthy ways, in all sorts of duality ways that were not healthy, that were not pleasant even. And so all of those things get stirred up, and for me it meant also, of course, that I had to change at that time jobs a few times. And then throughout the course I learned how to recognize what I need, what I like, what I want, to be able to say things, what I need, what I like, what I want, to be able to stand up for me. And all of this presence, consciousness brought this courage and almost like the guts to do certain things that prior to that I wasn't able to do. And so even those spaces now do not look even, anything to what they did before. And the amount of autonomy and the ability to fit that within my larger life is incredible. And it's almost magical and miraculous to other people, but it's like a slow process of and it's an experience, and it's getting wisdom and life experience. And then slowly but surely, as more and more of my life gets imbued, be present, be with the soul, with the presence, with consciousness, then all of the life changes, with all of those spaces change and become more and more. And so also inside there are all these huge paradigm shifts, as I kind of sink deeper and deeper into myself, or expand, into all of these different multidimensional spaces of myself. So I do go through these different aspects, or rather, identifications of my own self. And so, like I can, how I experience that is that, I may see, oh, this is how life is, or this is the truth of the world, or whatever. Because while I'm in it, I don't realize that I'm in it. And then as I'm sinking deeper or expanding into myself, I kind of step outside of that particular identification. And all of a sudden I realize, wow, that was just a game. And that was just, then I'm in a paradigm shift, you know? And that keeps happening and keeps happening. And it is also a normal part of being a dynamic soul embodied being, because this is what constantly changes. And these paradigms and potentials and identifications and aspects and facets, so constantly changes. And then there are also larger games or that we play. And so the reason why I wanted, I'm talking about this, and earlier I was kind of just glancing at the previous soul vibes, and I noticed how, that there was a setup for this month in when I was writing about, when we were talking about own authority, point of separation, and all of those experiences. And so in this last few weeks, for me, it felt like basically the Piscean age has finally collapsed within me. And so that's that larger game play, large identification that I was so immersed and involved with. And for those that follow the celestial changes, because there's on the inside, so on the outside, the planet Pluto has pretty much gone into Aquarius now, and it's at the moment in a place where it's never been this far into Aquarius. So it's been kind of going backwards and forwards for a couple of years, and this is the main change. And then it will go back, I think, later this year for just a little bit back into previous age. But it feels for me now that, yeah, the previous, whatever that was, whether one calls it a Piscean age or, Pluto in Capricorn, whatever, that reality has collapsed. And how is that experienced? For me, it's very similar to, let's say, when I identified with a certain aspect, and then I realized that it's an aspect, and it becomes a facet, and either let it go, or I can keep then playing with that, being it a facet. Once something becomes a facet, means what that means is that it's starting to flow. So it doesn't mean that every identification one has to let go or collapse or whatever, because once something from an aspect which is unconscious becomes a facet, meaning conscious, then all of those parts of that facet are in flow. And you can work with them. They become healthy and whole and changeable and flowing and all of that. So that's what difference between aspect and facet is. And then once you're even done with that facet, you don't want to identify with it anymore, because let's say you choose another potential, then you start identifying with the facet of that potential, and you can let that go. That we are on the inside such incredibly complex beings, and there is so much to this, and that's why it sort of feels, to the human self, it feels like this is going on for a very long time. Like, oh, let's say you're transforming something and it takes 2 decades, and I'm like, wow, for the human self it feels long, but from the soul perspective it's not. It's precisely because we are such complex beings on the inside. And so back to this collapse of this, what for me it felt like this collapse of this Piscean age is like that I've come to the edges, And then there was a point of separation. That was a feeling. And then I decided on the inside, yep, I'm going with this. And then as I chose to yes, to continue with that, then the collapse starts to happen. And then one day I just woke up and I felt this, it's kind of like the whole, I don't know, it's hard to even explain because it was so huge, it was so massive, it wasn't just one aspect collapsing, but it was just this whole inner world. It's kind of like the whole life story is just gone. And so I was walking in this very unusual space for a few days. When you know something big has happened, and it's like, I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know what I was. And even like, let's say, looking at relationships with people that I had within that, pre-Piscean age in my life, in my story, if someone asked me, okay, so what was this relationship with this person? A few days ago, I would tell you this, yeah, we were this and this and this, and then this happened, and I felt like this, and I was in a relationship like this to this person, whether it was partner or friend or whomever, family member. But now it's kind of like I can't say anymore who, it's not, I can't even remember who I was in a relationship to someone within that story, because that story is just gone. And who I a good person? Was I a bad person? Was I, a positive person? It just completely doesn't make sense. And also, like, let's say the people that are still around, to my surprise, I realized that, within that story, sometimes whom I considered as my good person, I actually were very causing trauma to me in that story. So I had a very wrong image or perception of who they were and who I was. And within that story that I was playing, I wouldn't be able to even see that or perceive that. It needed a collapse of that story for me to be able to, wow, to actually see who's who and what's what within the context of that story that just collapsed. And so it's a very, tender, vulnerable, and also intimate space, because you're like, who, I can't base myself, who am I, on the constructs of that story that I used to, like I would be able to say, like even a few weeks ago, I would be able to say, oh, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this. And then I'm like, I'm not. So it's kind of like you go underneath. And the wonderful thing is that after this initial, wow, what's happened? All of a sudden, then I can look at, wow, now is the opportunity that I recreate myself completely anew. And I have to, and this can, or feel like overwhelming, but it can also feel like quite exciting, because it's like I no longer have those parameters or restrictions of who I was within that story. And I now can choose, okay, so I can be this, and I can be this, and I can be this. And because that Piscean age, or that duality age, had so many restrictions within, I feel myself now much more authentic and true self, because that story, the nature of Piscean age, that duality, was that a human was disconnected from the soul self. And even though within that space I was able to connect with my soul and I was able to allow that, but once I didn't realize how much it was constantly impeding that being within that story, or rather that story being within myself, how it was constantly impeding that connection. And so when it collapsed, it's kind of like I fell into myself and I just felt like, oh my gosh, this is my true, authentic self. I've never felt so peaceful, so connected, and so just be okay with who I am, what I am, that incredible radical acceptance. Um, with everyone, with everything the way it is. And it doesn't mean that it won't change, but it's just like, wow, this is it. This is who I am. This is where I'm in. This is the life I'm in. And I can now start constructing, you know, who I am and what I want to be, and the parts that I want in this new life, and how I want to relate to anything anew. And there's so much of that story, even this, let's say, spiritual journey or journey of the soul, that is no longer actually needed. Like all of those, almost like mythological stories that let's say my human self would need, how as a soul I came and there was a journey of the angels, and none of that is anymore needed, because and it makes no sense anymore, because I'm home in self. There was no journey, there is no journey. And and those kind of props and ideas don't actually have any more space in this new space that I am, because this new space is asking me, so now what do you want to create within this new space? And I don't have to pull the ideas of the previous age into this new space. And so I'm still kind of finding myself in how it all is going to work out, or what, it's a day by day kind of experience, but it is extremely, I find it incredibly enjoyable, just in a sense of just being. And as I'm speaking, as I'm singing with words, the resonance, I invite you to feel all of these things within yourself, because it is the resonance of the voice, of the vibration that invites you. You're inviting yourself deep into your own inner peace in this way, deep into your own inner well-being in this way, deep into the depth of your breath, of the breath that no longer has those barriers there, those limitations that would prevent your body from being able to take that deep, peaceful, wholesome breath into yourself, into your own inner space, through all of the parts of who you are, who each one of us is. And so there are no parts anymore that are hijacking, that are, traumatizing. It's like the whole ideas of that duality just collapses. And so when people sometimes, if I look at myself, how at times I would be, frustrated through the journey, because I'll think, oh my God, but I've done this and it hasn't changed, and it hasn't changed, and it hasn't changed. And then I do it again, and still, and that is still, while within that paradigm, there's sometimes not really anything that you can do until you collapse that paradigm. Certain things simply cannot be changed because they are part of that paradigm, And so I would say to what has become apparent even more is to just be okay, this radical acceptance, to be okay. Like when in doubt, when the intensity is happening, when some part and aspect and blah, 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 all of these things. When in doubt, it is just come back as much as what you can to yourself without thinking, without having to think what to do, but just feeling, breathing, and loving self as much as what you can in that moment by moment. This is the answer, because as you keep loving and loving, and that keeps changing your paradigm, your inner world, slowly but surely. And then until one day that old world just collapses, you know. So some things, they do change slowly, and they change, and you can make your great life within the paradigm by doing the work that we do. And then at the same time, you know, each one of us knows that even there are some things that just we're not able to change. And is that radical acceptance? That's where it comes in, to accept what can't be changed and just be okay, you know. This is it. This is the best that it can get within this paradigm. Because within whatever paradigm one is, it can be incredibly beautiful and wonderful, even though there still are things that still, you know, you think, oh, I still want to change that, you know, because, you know, whether one wants to move the countries or move this or do this or do that, you know, when that radical acceptance comes in, then I can sit anywhere. It matters not which place, which location, because I am at home with myself. I am in that incredibly, deliciously enjoyable part of myself, the authentic me. There is no more barrier between me and me. And that is so satisfying, so incredibly satisfying in itself, that all these other props within one's life, they become so much smaller in relevance, or in their abilities to make me not feel good about myself. See, so the barometer or intensity of the influence changes. So, for example, you know how, you know, someone can say, oh, if only I can change this or that, then I will be happy. This truth that is really not true. All of these that kind of wisdom comes home, and it becomes a reality when it's kind of like a change from inside out. And so yeah, this January has been huge, and now we're in February, and it keeps going. And as you know, the whole universe, our universe, is conspiring with this, in a way that, you know, like the solar flares, they've just been, you know, intensifying. There's been many of them, and all of that energy hitting the Earth's magnetosphere, is assisting us with all of this. It's helping us. It's giving us energy and support to be able to be experiencing, to be able to riding these waves and waves and waves of change. And so, you know, perhaps you can notice within yourself as I'm speaking, how many constructed realities perhaps you've been able to let go, and how they've become irrelevant in this last month. and then the people who's still playing in that particular reality that you've just collapsed, because it doesn't mean once it collapsed within me, doesn't mean it collapsed for everyone else. And so, but other people are still playing in that reality, that constructed reality. And that also has been so apparent even more in these last few weeks, how many realities, these constructed realities, or like there is a term in psychology called shared fantasy. So shared fantasies was almost this a game that, let's say, a group of people choose to participate in, like if you, for those that are gamers, that sometimes you can play online a particular game with a number of different people. And so you put your headphones on and you're completely engrossed in that game. So for a time being, those players, doesn't matter where in the world they are, but you connect into shared fantasy. So that game that you're playing with those group of people is called the shared fantasy. And so then when you finish for that time, let's say you switch off your computer, you exit that shared fantasy. So now I can see just how many shared fantasies, these games, these agreed upon rules and ideas and stories and mythologies that one as a human being, we participate, whether with friends, whether with family, and it's fine. The shared fantasies are good. Like we as long as we're human, we participate in these constructed realities that sometimes they intersect, sometimes they don't. Some of the shared fantasies or constructed realities can be very, though, divorced from the reality itself, because within the physical world there are certain laws. I don't know if you're aware, but there's every law can be broken except for the law of physics and things like that. There are certain laws of physical reality that can't be broken while we're in it. And they also are changing with these shifting paradigms, but still. So you can be within those constructed realities or shared fantasies or those games, but some are a little bit off and disconnected from the physical world as it is, much more, much more truthfully and authentically and realistically. And for me, that also has become apparent in the last, much more than even before, in the last few weeks, as how certain shared fantasies diverge from physical reality. So for me, this being authentic and truthful self has also enabled me to perceive all of these agreed upon realities, of which there are many, and how their ideas and laws can be quite a bit off from physicalness. And this is part of becoming more and more embodied, because the more and more embodied I am, that would be another way of saying this, the more and more I am embodied as a soul being, the more I'm able to align myself with the truth of the physical reality, with the authenticity. And that gives me the feeling of peace, of being in the right place at the right time, all of these things, because, and the fear, it's gone, because the fear is an anxiety and all of these kind of things. A lot also have to do when I'm participating in a reality, in shared fantasy, that underneath, part of me underneath know that is quite far away from more real, more embodied, more physical, accurate picture or life, or participation. And so big part of being me, more authentic me, this true self, is because my eyes are clear, my ears are clear, my feelings, my intuitions are clear. They're not the intuitions of a integrated aspect. There can still be those voices inside and feelings that are not comfortable, but I know who I am. I know when authentic or real soul me, what I feel, what I think, what I perceive. I don't have to have those blinkers and filters. I can see reality as it is. And initially, many years ago, when I started to come into this now moment where this all happens in the now moment, where then I would see my life, it was all scary to because there was so much of my life was very unhealthy, very uncomfortable, and very different from what I imagined to what it really was, because I wasn't present with it. And I used to run into the future and into the past. And so this whole integration, it really is to become more and more here, more and more present, more and more okay with the reality. Just like when I mentioned before, when I allowed this presence of consciousness, let's say, into my space of my job, that then started transforming, and I had to allow it to change and take those steps, that it became comfortable, it became enjoyable, it became a reflection of the true self, true me. And so all parts of my life have gone through that kind of change. And so now when I'm sitting in my own true authentic self, being okay with who I am, and also being okay with the reality of my life, and the reality of my life, perhaps for someone else, may not actually look that much, because they might be impressed by certain other things, but those kind of things don't matter anymore. And so um and so yeah, it's been huge. It's been huge. And the important thing is, do not outsource the work of your soul. So that realization has been so strong, so important, even more than before. Do not expect that another person or being, or non-physical being, can do this kind of work of your soul. And when you keep coming back to self, you develop this incredible respect for yourself, real respect, because you've been there as you're changing, as you're going through the transformation, through these insights, through this kind of vast, huge change, transformation, transmutation that we're experiencing and have been experiencing, especially in the last, let's say, 30 years, especially. And so I would invite and I would congratulate, I would invite each one to keep at it. Keep self-loving, keep self-loving, keep self-respecting, keep self-honoring, regardless. And I would like to also congratulate each and every one, whether you're watching this now live or watching this now later, because this huge, the enormity, the work, the enormity of this experience that we're experiencing on this earth, it is pretty, it's enormous, and it's becoming more and more apparent how huge and what long lasting consequences universally this has, like it's so easy to fall into this idea, I'm just a little human with my little life and little issues, but none of it is little, none of it is small, it is huge, and these realities that we're opening up to, this constructed, co-constructed, co-created, co-agreed upon realities that we're opening up to are just so much bigger, and there are just so many of them, and they're like there are so many huge ones that go way past Earth, and that reach into the realms of non-physical worlds, and it's incredibly exciting. And so I'm gonna have a drink now. And yes, so I um I hope that each one present, that you are feeling excited about your life, yourself, where you are, what you have experienced, what you are yet to discover, what you are yet to dive into, that you're excited about who you are, a soul being, walking this incredible experience of earthly life. You are your own witness to these incredible times, and also you are your own witness to the incredible transformations and experiences that you are undergoing from within. You are also a witness to the incredible transformations of whole humanity that the humanity is experiencing as a whole. We and others have said many, we keep repeating these. These are unprecedented times. These are unprecedented changes, positive changes, loving changes, changes that have far-reaching influences and consequences for your own self, for your own soul, for other souled and non-souled beings in the whole universe, in the physical and non-physical worlds. All to say is to encourage you to open up to those spaces as never before of yourself, respect, self-trust, self-compassion, compassion for your story, compassion for all that you've done, compassion for your dedication, compassion for who you were, who you are, who you're going to be, and gratitude. And so let us feel, I invite you to feel into the gratitude for yourself, for your dedication, for the choices that you're making, for the courage that you have, courage that you are. Breathe it in deeply, deeply. Let it permeate you. Let it seep through you deep into each cell. Let each cell of your body feel your gratitude for its work too. For the cells of your body are living beings. You're living beings, billions and billions of individual cells that are singing the same song, song of you, song of your soul. They're responding, they're dancing with, they're playing, they're like an instrument upon which your consciousness as soul can play, can experiment with this incredible music, with this incredible song of yourself. And this frequency and the resonance of this song is so uniquely you, of who you are. And celebrate this uniqueness of yourself, uniqueness of your true, authentic self. And with all that you've experienced, and with all that you've done, and with all that you still will, feel this deep, permeating gratitude. And let this gratitude caress you, hug you, permeate you. Let it uplift you. Let it show you this incredible compassion for who you are. The first thing when you wake up in the morning, let it be the first thing you feel, you perceive, you remember, you breathe in. Let it be the first thing that comes to you as you breathe in. This wonderful, alive, life-giving air that your lungs breathe in. Let gratitude dance on each particle of this air and let it go joyfully, playfully into your lungs, into every part of your being, into every cell, dancing in light, in truth, in wholeness, and in joy. And it's been a pleasure and an honor again today to speak with you, to dance with you. And so, dear friends, until next time, namaste.